I have no mouth and I must scream is one of the scariest sentences I have ever read. It comes from a short story of the same name that was written by Harlan Ellison way back in the prehistoric times of 1967. And the reason this sentence is so impactful is you don't even have to read the story to get the idea of what it's trying to say. It's just such a despair-filling sentence. I have no mouth, but I must scream. Wanting to do something but being incapable of doing it is such a haunting idea. But actually reading the short story and understanding the context around this sentence makes it infinitely more times impactful and gives you so much more to think about. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the spark notes now. So I guess plug your ears or spoiler warning or whatever, even though this story is older than my grandmother. I'm going to be telling you everything that goes on. So the whole story takes place in a post-apocalyptic Earth after it has been absolutely ransacked by a supercomputer known as AM, created by humans and initially named Allied Master Computer, and then that name changed into Adaptive Manipulator, and then later on when it developed sentience and linked itself up, they started to call it Aggressive Menace. But by that point it was too late, and then it decided to rename itself to AM, which is said to mean cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. But then after AM gained sentience, it developed a hatred for humans for creating it without the ability to act on its thoughts. So it took over and wiped out all of humanity, only leaving 5 humans alive to torture them forever, acting as God in the domain, not allowing them to die, to exact its revenge. And this revenge is purely unimaginable horrors that these 5 have to experience for as long as AM keeps them alive, and it has practically made them immortal, just eternally making them suffer. And time also has practically lost all meaning. They have been there for 109 years in the story, but it feels far longer than that. But on top of all that, the AM has practically rewrote these people to make them suffer even more. And now I'm going to introduce you to the 5 characters of this story. The first is Benny, and what AM did to Benny, it made him resemble a monkey, and apparently also gave him a gigantic penis, quote, fit for a horse, that Ellen apparently really liked, and Ellen is the only woman of the group that was turned into this sexually promiscuous person that was only there to fulfill the men's sexual whims. And then there was Gorrister, who was a former objector and political activist, but now he's made to be apathetic. And then there's Nimdok, whose name isn't actually Nimdok, but the narrator says that AM renamed him that basically because it was this goofy name, and that was the supercomputer's way of having a sense of humor. And then finally we have our narrator, Ted, who is the only one who claims he hasn't been messed with mentally and is fully conscious and able to comprehend the terrible things they have to endure. He believes that AM left him this way because he or it hated him the most. Although Ted is the narrator, so there might be some bias in that, and there are some points throughout the story that suggest that he might have also been tampered with mentally as well. And Ted makes a point to bring up in the story that while AM may seem all-powerful, omnipotent, all-knowing, it's not God. It may seem like it, but it's not perfect. Which finally leads them to this ice cavern, which is supposed to have this canned food that they can enjoy because they haven't had anything resembling real food this entire time, practically. And the journey they described to make it to this was unending pain. It says they passed through a cavern of rats, and passed through the path of boiling steam, passed through the country of the blind, and we passed through the slough of despond, and we passed through the vale of tears, and they finally made it to the ice caverns. They made it to the food, the goal at the end that they needed. And then they realized they have no way to open the canned food. They have no can openers. They can't access the food that they worked so hard to get and endured so much to get to. Which causes Benny, the human chimpanzee, to go a bit bananas, if you will. So he jumps on Gorrister, one of the other dudes, and starts eating his face. But in this moment of hunger, despair, death, sadness, Ted sees an opening. He realizes there's an instant, and if he's going to do this, he has to act quick. He gets this giant icicle, and he stabs Benny, the ape dude, through the ribs and ends up killing him with it. Then he gets like another spear and gets on top of Gorister, the dude who was having his face eaten, and stabs him through the throat. And then Ellen sees what Ted is doing, so she grabs one as well and runs at Nimdok and ends up killing him. So 3 of them have been able to meet the sweet embrace of death, but there's only time for one more person to die, and Ted decides that he's going to allow Ellen to be freed as well. So he goes and kills her, but there's not enough time for him to kill himself because AEM realizes what's going on and puts a stop to it, but it is absolutely enraged and furious at what Ted has just done. Ted has taken practically everything that the AEM cared for, which was torturing these humans. He's taken 4 of them, and he is the only one that remains. And he thought that the AEM hated him before, but now he's going to get the real wrath of this supercomputer. And the way that the AM decides to punish Ted for what he's done, as well as allow him to never have a chance of escaping this endless torment, is that it turns him into this great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, pulsing white holes filled by fog where his eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once his arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter, and leaving a moist trail wherever he moves. So he's practically been turned into that blue blob from Monsters vs. Aliens, but he still is conscious and fully aware of everything that is going on, still feeling the pain and all that, just incapable of ever being released. Ted describes himself as outwardly dumb and inwardly alone. And he says at least the 4 of them are safe at last. AM will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier. And yet, AM has won. Simply, he has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Like I said, having the context to that final sentence really does make it all the more dreadful. It really fills you with this sense of helplessness that Ted is feeling at the end of the story. He knows that what he's done is a good thing, relieving his 4 companions from this endless torment, but he himself is now even incapable of expressing the emotions he's feeling. He can't even scream, yet he feels the desire to scream. He can't portray any emotion, do anything that he used to be able to do with his human body, because he's practically just stuck in this blob that just stumbles along, all the while being conscious and aware of everything. It's just such a horrifying thought, being stuck in this supercomputer hell, all alone now, just with your own thoughts, not even being able to express your own anguish by screaming, because that has been taken away from you. Everything has been taken away from Ted. Anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about. I just read this short story a couple days ago, and I had to talk about it because it was honestly so impactful. That line alone, it's got to be the scariest sentence I've ever read. I have no mouth, and I must scream. It's like saying, I have no butthole, but I must poop. I have no cock, but I must piss. And also, with all the advancements that ChatGPT is making, that thing where it can even replicate artist voices to make songs in their voices now, it's all getting scary and moving and advancing way too fast. There's a quote that's going around right now that this is the worst that AI will ever be, which is so horrifying, and makes this story from 1967 all the more believable and all the more frightening, because we're actually stepping into the domain of this potentially being a future possibility. But until then, I'm going to enjoy my plain old intelligent computer that's only capable of tormenting me when I open up Twitter.